The Opium War. In the 19th century, Great Britain was facing a huge trade deficit with China. There was a growing demand for British Chinese products like tea, silk, and porcelain. China, on the other hand, felt itself to be self-sufficient and didn't really desire a great deal of what they considered inferior foreign products. As a result, purchases made from China were costing Britain millions in silver currency. Some of the imbalance was corrected as Chinese peasants converted some of their cotton-growing land to tea. This created greater demand for British cotton, but even with this adjustment, Britain was not seeing the profit it wanted to see from its Chinese markets. British merchants needed some other product. They needed to create a demand for a product they could supply in quantity. The solution presented itself in the form of a pretty flower whose juices and pods could be prepared to make a highly enjoyable and highly addictive substance. This substance was opium. A profitable opportunity. Although opium had been used in China for medicinal purposes, it was not grown in quantity. Its dangers were well known, and by the late 18th century, its recreational use had been banned in China. As a narcotic, it was addictive. It turned a normally active person into a lethargic, slurring lump of flesh. However, the British had a huge supply of opium. It was grown in nearby India, which was controlled by Britain. The taxes on opium actually provided approximately 10% of the total revenue for the British government in India. By the end of the 18th century, there was somewhat of a demand in China for opium for recreational use, and the British, along with other European nations and the United States, decided to cash in on that demand by first meeting it, then increasing it. Increasing demand would be easy because opium was extremely addictive. Once someone started to use opium, it became very difficult to stop. Britain recognized the dangers and had made the use and importation of opium illegal in its own country. However, supplying China with the narcotic was a different story. In 1836, Britain was able to smuggle 8 million pounds of opium into China, thanks to the collusion of some Chinese government officials and merchants. With bribes and the promise of great financial rewards, the British partnered with these individuals to slip as much opium into China as possible. The 8 million pounds in 1836 translated into about $18 million. Since Britain had only purchased $17 million in Chinese goods, they were able to effectively negate the trade deficit with China in only 1 year. Unfortunately, this did not encourage the merchants to reduce the sale of opium. It was far too lucrative to simply stop. Despite increasing hostility and pressure from the Imperial Chinese government, when this hostility was translated into aggressive action to stop opium smuggling, Britain retaliated with military force. War and Treaty of Nanjing. The Opium War erupted due to not only a clash of cultures, but also the flagrant disregard for the opium restrictions imposed by the Imperial Chinese government. In addition to perceived unfair trade restrictions, there were issues concerning who had jurisdiction over crimes committed by foreigners on Chinese soil. The Chinese demanded that foreign transgressors be turned over to the Chinese courts, but the British believed the Chinese legal system to be barbaric and refused to do so. The British and other European powers looked at China as a backward heathen country. The Chinese viewed the foreigners with the disdain born of centuries of culture. In the end, the technological advances made by Britain's military won out. China did not have a chance against modern weapons of warfare and was forced to accept a humiliating defeat. The Treaty of Nanjing in 1842 was the first of the lopsided treaties that gave the British essentially everything they wanted and forced the Chinese to accept Britain's presence in their country on Britain's terms. The treaty ensured that all British nationals were subject only to British law, regardless if crimes were committed on Chinese soil or against a Chinese national. The British no longer had to pay the stiff trading tariffs that had cut into profits. They also forced the imperial government to open 5 key ports for trade. Merchants in both countries took advantage of the lifting of trade restrictions and further increased the flow of opium. The opium trade more than doubled in the 30 years following the Treaty of Nanjing.